European countries have pledged an additional 21 billion euros of military aid for Ukraine. The promises came at a meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group in Brussels. The U.S. has played a leading role in this forum since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began, but that's been scaled back since President Donald Trump moved into the White House. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth made a last-minute appearance by video link.
A last-minute change of plans had Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth virtually attending this 27th meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, a relief to Hegseth's counterparts, since it had appeared until the last minute he wouldn't participate at all in the group of some 50 countries founded and led by his predecessor to drive up military assistance to Ukraine, today co-chaired by the UK and Germany.
And I'm pleased to say that we have US Secretary Hegseth with us as well. He is traveling but was determined to join us.
Having other countries lead the UDCG after President Trump took office is something Europeans had hoped would be a temporary arrangement.
It was presented, at least to the outside world, as a one-off thing. And now it seems as more of a withdrawal on the US side from this coordinating institution that it has become. And, well, I don't know how to read that.
As he arrived at NATO headquarters ahead of the meeting, German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius was candid about current uncertainties with Washington, leadership of the UDCG being just one of them.
It would be unfair to ignore the fact that the US administration has changed course. The passion and reliability with which the United States has supported Ukraine over the past 3 years, particularly under the leadership of Lloyd Austin, has clearly changed. Another sign of that, the U.S. withdrawing troops and equipment from the Polish base, which facilitates the delivery of most military assistance to Ukraine. The Pentagon says responsibilities previously handled there by the U.S. will move to NATO and other allies. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk says he's been assured the U.S. troops will be reassigned elsewhere in Poland. Hegseth's remote remarks to the group were said to be matter-of-fact, things allies had heard from this administration before, and no new demands. But at the same time, there were no new U.S. pledges of support for Ukraine. There haven't been any since Trump took office. Absent more weapons from Washington, Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov is keeping the faith.
U.S. is beside us and focused on the peace, and we're working together. Our job is to make it happen. Thank you.
As Ukraine's support group wrapped up in Brussels, Trump envoy Steve Witkoff was beginning another round of peace talks in Russia.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined now by Joshua Shifrinson. He's an associate professor with the School of Public Policy at the University of Maryland. He specializes in international security. Professor, it's good to have you with us. European countries, as we just heard there, pledged billions in new military support for Ukraine. Nothing new coming from the United States. What does that tell you about U.S. support for Ukraine?
Well, it tells me a couple of different things. Number one, that the Trump administration's efforts to shift the burden for Ukraine onto the European portfolio is going forward is quite real. Second, and at the same time, we also see the United States clearly trying to put pressure on Ukraine to reach a ceasefire as a prelude to a longer-term peace deal with Russia. At the same time, finally, it tells me that the U.S. doesn't want to see Ukraine lose this conflict. It's just not willing to help Ukraine reclaim lost territories or go further in its conflict with Moscow.
Ukraine's President Zelensky says that his country is ready to buy additional air defense systems from the United States. He said that after Germany said that they cannot provide any new Patriot systems. So is this the U.S. strategy now, arms trade instead of arms aid?
Well, I don't think it's a shift in strategy. The United States has always been willing to sell arms to major combatants all around the world. I think in the Ukraine case, it's not a symbol of the U.S. being willing to trade now as opposed to provide aid. Rather, it's a clear effort by the Ukraine government's part to tie itself even further to the United States. If the U.S. is not going to provide aid, then buying American weapons at a time of American economic uncertainty is a way of creating supporters in the United States. It's a savvy strategy on the part of Ukraine.
The U.S. envoy Witkoff. He is meeting with the Russian president today after the Kremlin already said that no breakthrough is expected. So what are you expecting from this meeting? It's the third time that Witkoff has been to Russia.
Well, I'm expecting that Witkoff is actually being fairly candid with Mr. Putin. It's been very clear for some time now that Mr. Trump's patience with Putin on the ceasefire possibilities has been wearing thin. I expect Witkoff is bearing down on President Putin on that point. Also, it's very plausible that Witkoff is laying the foundation for a possible meeting between Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin. We know that Mr. Trump likes being seen as the peacemaker. It would not be surprising, therefore, if we're trying to create a presidential summit so that Trump can be seen as the one delivering a ceasefire or delivering progress towards a ceasefire.
Trump said earlier today that Russia should get moving. It looks like the U.S. president is losing patience with the Russian president. Do you think Vladimir Putin cares?
I think he does care. I think also Mr. Trump is indeed losing patience with Mr. Putin. I think Mr. Putin would have to pay very careful attention to that. Not only is there an economic stake in the game, the U.S. could obviously turn the screws further economically upon Russia, but also the Trump administration, as we noted, has backed off on aid to Ukraine. If Mr. Trump gets sufficiently fed up, then all bets are off, and the U.S. could flood the market with aid to Ukraine, and that would also have big problems if I were sitting in Moscow. So I think Mr. Putin has to pay very careful attention to this. I suspect he is paying careful attention to this. And if things go awry, I am not sure how this conflict will evolve going forward.
Yeah, let me ask you before we run out of time, how much leverage does the U.S. have if it wants to pressure Russia to agree to a permanent ceasefire sooner rather than later?
Well, so I think the question isn't just pressure. We've been putting a lot of pressure upon Russia, for a very long time, but a combination of sticks and carrots. And I hate the idea of rewarding Russia in any way for its behavior in Ukraine. But the reality is, if you want a ceasefire, and we've been applying pressure upon Russia with sanctions, with economic aid to Ukraine, with cutting Russia off from international institutions, then the menu of options for bringing Russia around will have to involve some degree of carrots, which of course can always be retracted in the future. I think there's a lot of the U.S. could be doing to incentivize Russia to come to the ceasefire table. I'm also pretty confident there's more the U.S. could be doing to incentivizing Ukraine. I'm just not sure if the political will or the skill is there right now.
Professor Joshua Shifrinson, we appreciate your time and your insights tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's get more from our correspondent, Teri Schultz, at NATO HQ in Brussels, where those talks are happening. Welcome, Teri. So we heard the German defense minister there sounding quite pessimistic about the chances of peace, despite the fact that the US envoy is in Russia today. Is his pessimism widely shared?
It is not just Boris Pistorius, but many ministers arriving here at the talks at NATO headquarters expressed the view that Russia doesn't want peace. After all, it's been a month since Ukraine accepted the ceasefire deal being brokered by the United States, and Moscow has dragged its feet. Now, that's not entirely against Europe's favor, because they hope that the Trump administration will be losing patience with Moscow and believing, as Europeans do, that the Kremlin can't be trusted and that President Putin doesn't want to end this war. So they'll be watching these talks very carefully, even as they believe that they probably won't come to fruition. What Europeans really are worried about is that a deal would be made that isn't fair to Ukraine and would put European countries as well in continuing danger.
Ukraine's allies, the big headline this morning so far is that they've pledged more than 20 billion euros in new military aid for Ukraine. How's that going to be spent?
That's right. And I should point out that just those packages announced here at the Ukraine Defense Contact Group is not the only aid coming from Europe or any of the some 50 countries that met here today. Some countries announce their packages as they get them ready or as they're passed by Parliament. But what was announced by today is some pretty significant help for Ukraine. On the UK side, for example, they're giving more air defense. They're giving hundreds of thousands of drones. Together with the UK, they're giving anti-tank mines.
Germany also announced its own package that will include Leopard tanks, for example. Remember when we didn't believe that Germany would be giving any Leopards to Ukraine? Now 15 will be on the way. Also 100,000 rounds of ammunition. Ukraine continues to say, as we've heard since the beginning of the war, that it needs more ammunition. So allies definitely keep that in mind. And at the same time, less glamorous, but very, very important contributions of spare parts so that they can repair the weapon systems that are being sent over to Ukraine. So I think Defense Minister Umerov from Ukraine probably went away quite satisfied with the package he's taking back today.
And the US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth participated virtually in today's meeting. What was his message?
We haven't gotten a detailed readout of what Pete Hegseth said. I was told that he was quite positive about what the UDCG is doing here. But at the same time, remember that the U.S. used to lead this effort. Only since President Trump took office has the U.S. not been chairing this meeting. So I should say also that until late yesterday, it was expected that Hegseth wouldn't participate at all, which, of course, would send a more negative message than coming in by VTC. But there's no sign that the U.S. is going to resume chairing this group of some 50 countries. And that's a real blow because founded by Hegseth's predecessor, Lloyd Austin, Austin used to call around to the countries and say, what more do you have? What more can you give Ukraine? I understand that you have this piece that would go together with this country's piece, and we'd really like you to provide that now. So that's not happening. It remains to be seen if the UK and Germany or whomever may chair this ad hoc can bring the same kind of momentum to the effort to assist Ukraine.
OK, thanks for that, Teri. Teri Schultz at NATO headquarters.